But I went to see Dr. Kunst, and of course, as I told you, the church for years was High German. They changed to English shortly before I went to college, I guess. But I went to see him, and I'll never forget the day, because he was the one man that I think, and even as I look back tonight, was perhaps a prophet of his day and of his time. And in the meeting that day in Philadelphia, the last thing he said to me before we left was spoken to me in High German. And these are the words that he spoke to me in High German. Sie müssen das rechte Wort predigen. And then he changed it into English in his way. He said, you preach the word. You preach the word. That was Dr. L.H. Kunz. Those were about the last words we spoke together until we said goodbye. And of course, I never saw him alive after that. Finally, after he passed away, they brought him back to New Knoxville, and he's buried at the cemetery where my mother and father are also awaiting the return. A man cannot live all these years without thinking about those words. And tonight I think they're burning like a fire in my soul. As far as I can see through the years, the Christian church has consistently degraded itself and is in disrepute and is held in disrespect and even in disdain. But millions who would not say so, but their actions speak much louder than their words. It is destitute of spiritual authority and power today. It is an apostate church simply called Christian. It is in many respects like the church of Diana of the Ephesians in Acts 19. The organized systems of the church today are like another Tower of Babel, so vividly described in Genesis chapter 11 and in verse 4, ending with the truth as depicted in Revelation chapter 17:5. But we look at Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. And they said, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven. In Revelation chapter 17, and you well recall that after that great declaration in 11:4, God went into operation and there was great confusion. And there has been ever since. But the ending of these organized systems of the so-called Christian church, as we know it today and see it around us, is depicted very vividly in Revelation 17 and in verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abomination of the earth. And in verse 1 of chapter 17, there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon the many waters. The cause of our modern day dilemma, which is being referred to nationally today in a number of different words. The basic word that's used in the word is the word heresis, transliterated into English as heresy. It is also translated sect in the New Testament, but most of the people prefer to call it cults today. Whatever they prefer to call it is simply irrelevant, because they are not dealing with the causes. They're only dealing with effects. They're dealing with symptoms. Symptoms of a sickness which is much more critical than the effects which are being manifested. There is no reason upon earth for the ministry of the Way today as a biblical research and teaching ministry. Absolutely no reason upon earth except one, and that is that the organized so-called Christian systems have moved away from God's Word. And God, by His mercy and grace, is bringing at least some people back to the integrity and accuracy of the Word. If the Christian church, so-called, would have carried out the responsibility of rightly dividing the Word and teaching the Word, the Way ministry as we know it today would not be in existence. There would be no need for it. Things that you learned in PFAL, you should have been taught from the time your mother and father carried you into that building. I think the two great reasons could be stated in what I referred to as the two great rejects. The so-called Christian church has rejected the great mystery, and secondly, the hope. The mystery was replaced by a head who was spoken of as the Vicar of Christ. When Colossians 1:18 and Ephesians 4:15 so specifically state that Christ is the head of the church. A man may be the head of a ministry, but no man can ever be the head of the church, because Christ is the head of the church. But they exchanged the mystery, where Christ is the head of the church, into where men became head of the church. And they exchanged the perfection of the greatness of the mystery by ordinances and works. When Ephesians 4:30 declares so specifically regarding the great mystery and the Christ in you, that we're sealed unto the day of redemption, they replaced it by ordinances. And that man is made perfect as he keeps these ordinances, as he attends this or goes through that, observes this or observes that. The second great truth of the hope of Christ's return was replaced by the preparation for death. Wasn't the hope of Christ's return that was taught? If they teach, just prepare yourself for death. Get ready, that when you die, you know you're going to go to heaven. It has issued in what we have on every counter today, in every store where books are being sold and magazines, along the line of life beyond the grave. The voices that speak from the other side. The book entitled Voices from Beyond. It is promulgated in higher academic institutions of learning as ESP. The outreach of the mind. And it's stipulated many times in just the plain statement, there is no death.